Hello, dear viewer. You are most welcome to this lesson. We are going to discuss primary 6 work, and we are going to continue following our workbooks. To remind you, in the previous lesson, we were looking at drainage, that is, water bodies as resources. Remember, we are still looking at resources in East Africa, and in that subtopic of water bodies as resources, we looked at lakes as water bodies, and under resources. And today we are going to be looking at rivers that we have in Africa, also being resources in Africa, in East Africa. We have this on page 78, that is in our workbooks if you are following them. So when we have a heading like this, we are going to understand what we mean by a river. We shall be looking at the examples of these rivers that we have in East Africa. Then we shall also be looking at the terms which are used in connection or in relation to rivers, terms which are related to rivers. Then we shall also be looking at how are those rivers then important to us. And then we shall also be looking at other things in it. To begin with, we have a river defined as a long mass of water. A long mass, we have to say, of flowing water, not just water. A long mass of flowing water. And this long mass of flowing water is found on the surface of the earth, or we can call that the earth's surface. So we can say a river is a long mass of flowing water on the earth's surface. So that is how simple we can define a river. A long mass of flowing water on the surface of the earth. Now, rivers are grouped or are divided into two. We are going to have that as types of rivers. Remember, when we are going through our work like this, we have to be with our pens, and where necessary, we tap some other information that we can be adding here, which might be missing in our workbooks. So we need to be steady and ready to adjust. We have the types of rivers that we are having. Two types of rivers. We have what we call the seasonal rivers. We have the seasonal rivers. And then the other ones are the ones that we call permanent rivers. Permanent rivers. We should be able to explain which are these we call seasonal rivers, which are these we call permanent rivers. Now, this is very simple for us to understand. Something seasonal does not mean that it is, it doesn't mean that it's ever there. It's like it happens in some occasions, then it comes and disappears. It's there and it can also disappear. So when we talk of a seasonal river or seasonal rivers, we are simply meaning rivers which flow. I mean rivers which have water only during the time when the rain pours. That is during the wet season that we call the rainy season. And then when the dry season comes, of course, there will be prolonged sunshine. These rivers end up drying. Those rivers are the ones we call seasonal rivers. So in definition, we shall say seasonal rivers are rivers that flow during the rainy season and will dry up during the dry season. The map symbol that we use to show this kind of rivers is this. We dot like that. Then when it comes to a permanent rivers, if there are many, we shall say these are rivers that flow throughout the year. In other words, they have water. They keep on flowing throughout the year, whether in the dry season or in the wet season. For them, they have water throughout the year. And those are the rivers that we can simply use this kind of a representation as the map symbol. This is how we draw the map symbol for that river, which is permanent. So before we look at these rivers, we are going to look at some terms which are related to or which are connected to rivers. Terms related to rivers. So we are going to understand which terms are those which are related to rivers. The first term that we have to understand is what we call a mouth of a river. Sorry, let's begin with a source. A source of a river. This we can also call it a river source. Now, what is a river source, or what is a source of a river? This is a source is where something is put, where something where we find something. Which means here we are looking at a place where we find the river starting to flow. That is where a river begins to flow. So we can simply say a source of a river is a point where a river starts to flow. That is what we need to understand there. So we have understood a source of a river as our first term. We are saying a source of a river is a point where a river begins to flow, which means we need to note that we have rivers beginning flowing from different places. If we are to look at sources of rivers, before we go to the next term, let's look at the sources of rivers that we have in East Africa. One look at where do these rivers begin flowing from? You will find that some rivers begin flowing from some lakes. Some rivers begin flowing from some swamps, and then we have some rivers beginning to flow from mountains. Remember, these mountainous areas receive a lot of rainfall, so the river can pick the water from there. So these are some of the places where these rivers begin flowing from. Then we continue. We have the second term, which is related to rivers, and that is what we call a mouth of a river. Mouth of a river. So, what do we mean by the mouth of a river? Mouth of a river. It simply means, I know someone must be wondering, if a river has a mouth, does it eat? No. Here we mean a place where a river ends. In other words, we say a place where a river pours its water. All those are the words that we can use. So, a source, a mouth of a river is a place, or we can simply say is a point where a river, we can simply say a point where a river ends. That is the mouth of a river. Then we also have, in connection with this mouth of a river, we need to understand that rivers flow and they end in two ways. Rivers flow and they end in two ways. There are rivers that end by splitting to form other or several small rivers. Those ones form what we call a delta. They form what we call a delta. That is another third term, which means if we were having a river starting to flow, for example, when we look at the flow of River Nile, we say River Nile starts flowing from Lake Victoria, and this river flows we say it flows northwards because the northern part is on a lower altitude, remember, it flows and it goes to Southern Sudan, then it reaches Egypt where it forms a delta. It forms a delta. This point here where a river begins to split into other several small rivers as it is now pouring its water here to its mouth. This is now the mouth. So this point where it begins to subdivide is the one we call a delta. So we need to know that some rivers end by forming a delta. So a delta is a place where a river subdivides into several streams as it enters its mouth. That is what we call a river, a delta, a point where a river subdivides into several streams as it enters its mouth. So we are having here a point where this river subdivides, splits into several streams as it is delivering its water to its mouth. That is the point that we call a delta. Then also, some rivers do not form a delta. Instead, for them, they widen, forming what we call an estuary. We can put that as our number 4. An estuary. So we are having another term that is connected to rivers and estuary. Now, like I said, some rivers, instead of forming a delta, instead of subdividing, what happens to them is, on nearing their mouth, that is where they pour the water, these rivers tend to widen. The river widens. In other words, it becomes wide as it now begins to pour or to carry large volumes of water into its mouth. So this part where a river widens is what we call an estuary. We can simply define it as the wide mouth of a river. Or we can say a point where a river widens as it pours its water to its sea. So we can take any of the two. Both are correct. We can say an estuary is a wide mouth of a river. A wide mouth of a river. Or we can simply say an estuary is a point where a river widens as it pours its water to its mouth, as we have already said. So that one is also another answer. Then the other one is, we have what we call a river confluence. A river confluence. We have a river confluence. Now, a river confluence, we are looking at, you will find that there is a main, for example, if this is the main river, let me draw another one to make you understand this. If this is a river, this is its source. This is the source of the river. And of course, it can be a lake, a swamp, a sea, whatever, as we say. And we have the river flowing. The river is flowing, and this river takes the water to its mouth. Maybe the mouth is now here, where this river is to pour the water. Whether it forms an estuary or it forms a delta. Now, in the flow of a river, you will find that there can be another river coming, also flowing. Maybe it has its source somewhere. Maybe it begins from a certain mountain or a swamp, whatever the source, and it comes, it has its source here. This river comes flowing and it joins this one. I hope we are seeing this. Now, this part where this river joins this one this meeting area here is what we call a river confluence. Can be 2 rivers meeting or sometimes even more rivers meeting. Therefore, we can simply say an estuary, a river confluence is a point where 2 or more rivers meet. That is the meaning of a river confluence. A point where 2 or more rivers meet. That meeting point is the one that we have called a river confluence. But what we also need to note is this river here is also given a name. This small river we are seeing, which brings its water to meet the main one. In other words, we are saying it brings its water and it pours it to the main river. That small river is what we give the name as a tributary. A tributary. So if we are to define a tributary, we shall use simple English. We shall say a tributary is a small river that pours its water to the main one. Or we can simply say a tributary is a small river that feeds the main one. When we say it feeds, it means it brings its water and pours it onto this main one. So we are saying a tributary is a small river. As you can see it on the diagram, very small, a small river that feeds the main one. The answer is already there, but a small river that feeds the main one. Then we also need to note that sometimes you may find that there can be another river which can branch. There can be another, much as this one is bringing water, but we can also be having, that river can also be having other small rivers that take some part of its water somewhere. In other words, it diverts some water. It drains some water. It takes away some water. So we can't have that here. You'll find that there is a small river that can take water away from the main one. That small river is the opposite of this one, which brings. So this one, we are going to give it the name called, this is term 7, we call this a distributary. Distributary. Now, when it comes to us defining a distributary, we shall simply say a distributary is a small river, just like a tributary, a small river. But now this one does not pour the water to the main one. Instead, it takes water away. So we can say a small river that drains. By it taking water, it means it's draining the main one. A small river that drains the main one. Full stop. We shall have gotten the answer for a tributary, a distributary. And then we have what we call a watershed. That is a stretch of highland separating 2 or more rivers. Then we have a basin, an area drained by a river and its tributaries. And then also we have what we call meanders. Meanders, we look at where a river begins to meander, to coil. Those are the parts that we call meanders. And the other time when we're looking at lakes, we say that these meanders lead to the formation of what we call the oxbow lakes. You find a river starting as it's flowing, a river starts to meander. And we say that due to this continuous meandering, and there will be deposition. You find the deposition of sand can take place at the meanders here. And what will happen is this part will be blocked. Even it will be blocked, cut off, and the river will continue flowing now like this. And this cut off part here will now form the lake that we call the Oxbow Lake, and this river continues. This we learned it in the previous lesson when we were talking about types of lakes. If you didn't watch it, Please kindly read it and you watch it. We have also what we call waterfalls on rivers. Waterfalls, of course, with waterfalls we mean a steep fall of water in the flow of a river. So those are among others the features which we find on which are associated. I mean, these are the terms which are associated with rivers. The table on page 79 gives us the rivers that we have in East Africa. Of course, when we look at, for us in Uganda, we have very many rivers, including the longest river in Uganda, longest in East Africa, the longest in Africa, and the longest in the whole world, that is River Nile. And then we also have other rivers like River Achwa, we have River Kafu, we have River Katonga, River Semliki, River Mayanja, River Sezibwa, River Mobuku, very many of them, we cannot be able to finish all of them. And then we go to Kenya, we have rivers like River Tana, River Galana, and we also have other rivers like River Ruvuma. Remember we said Ruvuma, that is the one which separates Mozambique from Tanzania. And then we also have River Kagera, which is at the border between Burundi, Tanzania and Uganda also. So that is what we have on that page 79. We are going to look at waterfalls, that is on page 80. We have said waterfalls. We say waterfalls are the steep. This is the steep. A waterfall is a steep fall of water in the flow of a river. A waterfall is a steep fall of water in the flow of a river. In the flow of a river. These waterfalls are the ones that we draw, that we represent by having this kind of a map symbol. That is the map symbol for a waterfall. We shall also be able to tell that these waterfalls are good, at the same time they are not good to us, to a country. How are they good? Number one, you will find that these waterfalls can attract tourists. People can go there and they watch them. They watch, they see the waterfalls, thereby raising income that is revenue to the government of that country. And then we also have waterfalls helping in, we have them like helping in the generation of hydroelectric power that can be used to run machines. So there we can say waterfalls are good. And then also we have the disadvantages. You'll find that these waterfalls hinder transport, and that transport is we have as water transport. We have the examples of waterfalls in East Africa. We have the Bujagali Falls, the Karuma Falls, we have the Makshon Falls. Then we also have other waterfalls which are not in East Africa, but they are in Africa. That is why you are seeing those first ones which are appearing there. Those ones are not in East Africa. The Busa Falls on River Niger, that is in Nigeria. That one is not in East Africa, but we have put it there such that you can also understand that. We shall look at it when you come to primary 7. That's when we shall talk about Africa as the whole continent. And then we also have the Victoria Falls on River Zambezi. That one, we shall also be talking about it when you come to primary 7. But for East Africa, we have got the Bujagali Falls that we have, and we are having Karuma, and then Makshon Falls. All these falls are built on River Nile. They are found on River Nile, and we have said for them they help in attracting tourists and helping in generation of hydroelectric power. We are going to page 81, where we have the stages of a river. And we are going to use this diagram that we have here to help us understand the stages of a river. Now, a river has got 3 stages. A river has got 3 stages. I say a river has got 3 stages. One, we have what we call the upper stage of a river. The upper stage of a river. We are going to look at these stages. And then we shall have the middle stage of a river. Middle stage of a river. And then finally we have the lower stage of a river. Now, what we also need to note is these stages, we can also call them courses, a river course, course of a river. So if someone does not want to say upper stage, someone can say the upper course of a river. Also here, someone can say the middle course of a river, like that. So we need also to note, because tomorrow they can ask you, write down any 2 courses of a river. Then you may be like, for us we're learning about stages. We didn't again know about the courses. They are the same things that we are talking about. This upper stage of a river, we also call it the youth stage of a river. Here we mean the stage where we are now looking at when a river is beginning to flow. That is from its source. If we were to have those stages here, we are going to use this diagram to help us understand those stages of a river very well. So in fact that we shall have this river divided into 3. So we are having the first stage, that is the youth stage, that is where a river begins to flow. Then we have the middle stage here, and then we shall be having the last stage in the flow of this river. Now what happens here is we have got the features which are found on each stage. For example, in the first stage of the river, that is in the upper stage, the river begins flowing very fast. Remember, and this is characterized by that river forming features like waterfalls. Those are now features. Features on the upper stage that we are also calling the youth stage or youth course of a river. We are saying the water moves very fast. That is now under what we call characteristics, and it forms features like waterfalls. It forms features like water rapids can also be formed during that youthful stage of a river. And then when we go to the middle stage, you find that the river starts to flow steadily. That is the characteristic. What happens? The river in the middle stage starts to flow steadily. Here we had waterfalls formed. And then we have water rapids. Remember, this is the youthful stage that we call the upper stage. Here is the middle stage. This is the middle stage of a river that we can also call the middle course of a river. We also have this river beginning, we are saying the water begins to flow steadily and begins forming meanders. Meanders, we looked at them, the other coiled parts of the river. So here we have the water starts to form meanders. The water begins to form meanders. So these are now the features we are having. The water moves steadily and moves and forms meander. Now, by the time the river reaches the last stage, that is now the lower stage of the river. Lower stage. Here, we have now the water beginning or moving now slowly as the river pours its water, and we shall be having features now formed here. we shall have features like this river can end with either a delta, or the other time we say a river can end by forming a delta or an estuary. So now those are the features that we can have in this last stage of a river that we call the lower stage of a river. So we are going to look at the economic activities that are done in each level or in each stage of the river. Now, when we look at the first stage, we say in the first stage, waterfalls are formed, water rapids are formed, meaning that here we have generation of hydroelectric power, that is HEP, generation of hydroelectric power. And then we have tourism, due to the waterfalls there, people can visit to see that. Then in the second stage, still we have tourism happening. We are saying the water begins to flow steadily, meaning transport can be possible in that stage of the river. Then when we go to the last stage of the river, whereby we say a river can form either a delta or an estuary. There we shall still have activities like tourism still comes in. These deltas sometimes have they have the fertile soil that can support crop growing. So crop growing can be another economic activity that can take place, that is in that lower stage of a river. And then also fishing can take place, and mining of some minerals. Some deltas have got minerals that can be mined. So those ones are done, or those activities can be carried out in that last stage that we call the lower stage of a river. We are having rivers that form deltas in East Africa. We are having River Nile. We have already talked about this. We have this one. This River Niger is not in East Africa, but we have put it there. Like I told you that these other ones you will understand them when you come to primary 7. This River Niger, and then River Zambezi. And then we have River Nyanza, that is in Kenya. River Rufiji, that is in Tanzania. And then we have River Semliki in Uganda. Those are the ones we find in East Africa. Then we go to the importance of rivers. The importance of rivers. We find it on this on page 84. We are now asking ourselves, how are rivers important in an area? How are rivers important in a country? Now, the first answers, like I have always told the children, that when we come to when we are looking at water bodies, whether lakes, whether rivers, whether swamps, as long as we are talking of a water body, then there are obvious answers that we should expect to have. Number one, this being water bodies can provide us with water itself. Then fishing takes place in this water body. So the two answers should be at your fingertips whenever you see a question asking for the importance of these water bodies. So for that case, we shall begin with those two. We can say rivers provide water. Rivers provide water. Of which water can be used for several activities. It can be used for domestic industrial use, or it can be used for irrigation. We should also be able to get that. So we have talked about water in general. Rivers provide water, that is correct. Two, rivers are sources of fish, meaning people can go and carry out fishing from these rivers. That is another correct answer that we can have. And then we should also be able to note that rivers promote tourism. Rivers promote tourism. We were looking at a river, the other features on a river, like the waterfalls. We say they can attract tourists that bring income to a country, or that raise the government revenue. So rivers promote that. And then we should also be able to tell that some rivers help in rain formation. They help in rain formation. Of course, being a water body, you find that they help in formation of convectional rainfall. That is what we have there. And then some rivers have waterfalls. We can be specific because not all. Some rivers have waterfalls. Some rivers have waterfalls that help in the generation. Of hydroelectric, not electricity. We have it as hydroelectric power. That is what we write as HEP. We can also call it hydroelectricity, but there now you can't again say power. If you want to put power, you write it as hydroelectric power, or we can simply write it as hydroelectricity. That is the type of electricity that is generated from the fast flowing water that we have on rivers mainly. Then we have also some rivers promoting water transport. Some rivers promote water transport, which means some rivers can be used for transport. People can sail or can pass on them. Like you are going to the other side, you can use a river. That is water transport. So some rivers promote water transport. However, when it comes to this, we are going also to understand something, that some rivers do not promote water transport. For example, when you look at River Nile has got parts. We have the Victoria Nile, that is the Victoria part of River Nile. You'll find that Victoria Nile is not well developed, it's not good, it's not safe for water transport. Why? So we are going to have reasons why some rivers, let's have a note saying, some rivers are not well developed, or we can simply say some rivers are not good for water transport. That is what we can call navigation. Some rivers are not good for water transport. Then we should be able to give the reasons as to why these rivers are not good for water transport. So we are having our heading on our board saying reasons why some rivers are not good for water transport. Meaning, reasons why some rivers cannot be navigable. So we are going to give the reasons, like one, we say some rivers have waterfalls. They have waterfalls. Remember, when the waterfalls are on a river, there is nowhere you can go with your boat. You find as you're rowing your boat, as you're sailing your boat, you come across a waterfall, the boat will be taken by the water and you will get a serious water accident. So these rivers have got waterfalls. Then some of them have fast flowing water. They have fast flowing water. Meaning the water flows very fast in them, forming what we call water rapids. They have water rapids, can have fast flowing water, and then some have water rapids. The water flows as it coils. So you'll find that it becomes very difficult for one to row the boat or to sail on such a water body. Then we have some rivers having the floating vegetation. The floating vegetation that we call suds. Some rivers have got suds, floating vegetation. So you'll find that these suds block the water. Therefore, a boat cannot be able to move on that water. And then some rivers have got rocks. They have rocks underneath. They have rocks underneath. So these are reasons as to why these rivers cannot be good for water transport. I have given you an example of such rivers. We have River Nile in Uganda, which is not having most of its parts not safe for water transport because of such reasons. We have dangers of rivers to the people who live near them. Just like we looked at the dangers of lakes, also rivers, we shall be having dangers like floods can come. These rivers can flood when the rain becomes too much, the water fills beyond and it splashes or it goes to the nearby communities, and such areas can flood. And then we also have these rivers being breeding places for disease vectors, which can of course make those people to get diseases. And then these rivers can also be harboring dangerous aquatic animals like the snakes, the crocodiles, of which animals can harm people. Then sometimes we have people drowning in them. Rivers can cause drowning. People can drown in these rivers and they die. And that's why you will find that when you're in primary 2 down there, we are told that when we are using water transport, we are always advised to use life jackets, such that when you fall, in the river or in the water body, at least you should be able to float and you can save your life. So that is about rivers that we have in Africa, and that is about the advantages, the disadvantages, as I had told you when we were beginning. So, we are going to look at another example of a water body. Remember, we are looking at water bodies as resources. We are done with the lakes, we are done with the rivers. Now we are going to look at swamps as water bodies. Of course, these water bodies become resources. Now, here we shall be going back to our down classes. Those are the lessons that we learned in the down classes. As far as P3 there, we say a swamp, you are going to have the same definition here. A swamp is a waterlogged area, with vegetation. That is the beginning part of our discussion about swamps. A waterlogged area with vegetation, implying that this area has got water in it and also there is vegetation which grows around it. Now, this will take us to understand the types of swamps. But before that, we need to remind ourselves that we have the map symbol for a swamp. How do we represent a swamp on a map? You will find that we represent represent a swamp just like the way we represented it when we were in primary 5. So this can be the map symbol for a swamp. Now, we are going to look at the types of swamps. Types of swamps. And when we are looking at types of swamps, here we are going to base on the vegetation or the type of vegetation that grows in that swamp. Therefore, for this we shall be able to come up with the answers like 1. We have some swamps that have got vegetation like papyrus growing in them. That is the vegetation in that swamp. Papyrus. You find a waterlogged area with papyrus growing around it. That is what we call a papyrus swamp. So that swamp having papyrus forms what we call a papyrus swamp. Then some swamps, they don't have papyrus, but you find they have trees growing in them. Now, a group of trees growing together in an area forms what we call a forest. Therefore, we shall be having those as forest swamps. Forest swamps. And that is where we shall be also be able to understand what we call the mangrove swamps. Under those, we shall also be able to tell what we mean by the mangrove swamps. Let us look at the importance of swamps in an area. Now, swamps, being water bodies, can be having a number of importance, just like the other ones we talked about, rivers and lakes. Remember, I have told you that whenever we talk of water bodies, then we should not forget about water and fish. Which means, also here, when it comes to us giving the importance of swamps, importance of swamps. Importance of swamps. Importance of swamps, we shall be able to begin with the other first one. We say swamps provide people with water. Provide water to people. And this water can still be used in different ways. We can have water for irrigation, water for industrial use, water for domestic use. So we shall not be able to talk about all. We shall just use one general answer. Swamps provide water to people. Then 2, swamps are fishing grounds, meaning they are sources of fish, where people can go and fish. Swamps are sources of fish. And we say, mainly, we have what we call the mud fish. We have the mud fish, which is always got from these swamps. Then we also have swamps being sources of craft materials. Swamps are sources of craft materials. Sources of craft materials. Meaning, we have them, they become sources of items which are used in making crafts. For example, we have items like clay in the swamps, which can be used for making items like pots, items like plates, those clay, those ones which are made up of clay. And then we have others like cups. Then also we have papyrus itself. We talked about papyrus, which is in swamps, of which papyrus can be used for making items like mats. And then we shall also be having palm leaves. Palm leaves can also be there, which can be used for making other items like baskets, items like hats, the ones that people wear on their heads. So that is about being sources of craft materials. Then swamps can also be, apart from being sources of craft materials, they can also be sources of building materials. We have craft materials and then building materials. Building materials. When we talk of building materials, we look at items like sand got in a swamp, items like reeds, which people can use to make temporary houses, like the grass-thatched houses that we call huts. So those ones can also be got from the swamp. And then also we need to note that these swamps, being water bodies, can also influence the formation of rain. They can contribute to the formation of rain. And of course still, this is convectional rainfall. So we can simply say swamps help in rain formation. Help in rain formation. And then we have other answers like swamps can be used for grazing animals. Swamps provide space for grazing animals. Animal grazing, or you can simply say for grazing animals. And lastly, I want to give you the point that these swamps can also be, though this one is now under their destruction. Of course, some people now can make them areas where they can grow their crops. Though this is not good, it's not safe, we shall be looking at that. So we can say swamps provide space, or we can simply say some crops can be grown on land, on swamps. Some crops can be grown in swamps. Now, we are going to look at the examples of such crops that can be grown in swamps. Which crops are these that people can grow in swamps? Here, we now look at crops that require a lot of water for them to grow well. In other words, we find that these crops need to grow in an area which is having water. They grow in water. For example, when we look at crops like rice, you will find that rice needs to grow in water, in an area having water. Then we shall also be having crops like sugarcane. And then we shall have the cocoa yams, or we can simply call them yams. So these are the crops that, among others, that are grown in swamps. Now, there is something that we need to understand here. Because tomorrow we can be asked a question, why is rice grown in swamps? Why are cocoa yams, why is sugarcane grown in swamps? Simply, when you are given such a question, I want you to take it that these are the crops that need a lot of water. Sometimes we mess up by saying because swamps have got the fertile soils. No, even other upland areas can be having fertile soils, but when these crops are grown there, they will not do well as they would be in these swamps. So the point there is on water. You will simply say rice grows well in the swamps because the swamps have got enough water that it requires or that it needs to grow well. By you saying that, you will get a very nice answer and you will be able to pass. We are continuing, having looked at the importance of swamps. We are going to look at problems that are associated with swamps. Like we look at problems that people can face, those who live near swamps. Problems facing people. Problems facing people living in swampy areas. Now, these people who live in the swamps, remember, people can destroy the swamps and they end up constructing their houses there. So they begin living in that swamp. Of course, that will lead us to what we call swamp degradation. We shall be having that as our next subheading here. Swamp degradation. So we continue with the problems. Those people can face a problem of floods. When the rains come, the water level is going to increase in that area, and of course the water can go to their homes and can fill their houses, and they will be suffering from the problem that we call floods. Then we have another problem of disease vectors. Disease vectors. You will find that those swamps breed these disease vectors. They are breeding places for these disease vectors. For example, we have the mosquitoes. We shall have in the vectors like flies. Those insects, those vectors can spread, can cause diseases to, they can spread diseases to people. And then we have also those areas are too cold, more so during morning and evening hours. So that can be another problem facing them. And then finally, these areas or these people can end up drowning in those swamps. So drowning becomes also another problem that is facing those people who live in swamps. Let's go to what we call swamp degradation, as we have it here on our board. Now, swamp degradation, the word degrade simply means to lower the quality of something. Now, for this case, we are looking at a swamp being degraded or a swamp being destroyed. So we can simply say swamp degradation means the lowering. Swamp degradation is the lowering of the quality of a swamp. We need to note that we can have swamp degradation. Tomorrow we can have land degradation. Next time we shall have environmental degradation. We look at what has been asked. If it is swamp degradation, we simply say lowering of the quality of a swamp. If it is land degradation, we shall simply say it's the lowering of the quality of land. If it is environmental degradation, we shall simply say it's the lowering of the quality of the environment. We are on swamp degradation. So we are meaning the lowering of the quality of the swamp. Now, can we look at ways swamps are degraded? Ways swamps are degraded, meaning how do people lower the quality of land in an area. Ways swamps are degraded. In other words, we are looking at ways through which people lower the quality of a swamp in an area. The first is people practicing what we call swamp drainage. Swamp drainage. Now, what do we mean by swamp drainage? Swamp drainage, we are looking at the removal of water from a swamp. To drain means to remove the water from an area. Or we can simply say that the reduction of water. Of course, this would also take us to understand, why do people do that? Why do people drain a swamp? Maybe they want to get land where they can grow crops. Maybe they want that area to become dry so that they can construct their houses there. That is what we call settlement. Maybe they want to get that area and they build factories, industrialization. Maybe they want that area to, maybe they want a road to pass via that area. So all those are reasons as to why people practice what we call swamp drainage. And sometimes it's due to brick making. Remember, people can make bricks, and to make bricks, people need water to make the mud that they can use to make a brick. So all that is under what we call swamp drainage. The other one is we have what we call swamp pollution. Swamp pollution. As a candidate, you can simply understand pollution as the addition of harmful substances. Like if you are looking at swamp pollution, then we mean addition of harmful substances to a swamp. We can also have land pollution, meaning we are adding harmful substances to land, depending on what has been asked to us. So swamp pollution, we mean people sometimes pour waste materials, things that can become harmful, that can become toxic, thereby spoiling the swamp, and that becomes a problem or that a swamp can face, and will lower its quality. And then we have people who burn the vegetation which is near the swamp or which is in that swamp. We call that simply bush burning. This also can affect that swamp. And then we have poor fishing methods done in the swamps, like we have overfishing, which can be done in a swamp. That one also becomes a problem. And then we shall have overgrazing, people carrying out overgrazing in the swamps. This will lower the quality of a swamp in an area. Of course, they become a problem. Now, what should be done to help or to overcome these problems? That is now under what we call solutions to land. Solutions to swamp degradation. Which solutions are these? What can be done? Number one, the government can come up with strict laws against destruction of these swamps or these wetlands. That's why we have what we call the National Environment Management Authority, which is responsible for the conservation or for the protection of wetlands in Uganda. So coming up with strict laws that are against destruction of these wetlands can become a solution. So the solution number one is setting up strict laws. Setting up strict laws against swamp destruction. Against swamp destruction. That is our first answer. The government should set strict laws which are against the destruction of these swamps. Then, two is by ensuring proper disposal. Remember, we said the other problem that these swamps can face is the problem of pollution. People dump things anyhow into a water body, into the swamp. So what should be done is by ensuring what we call proper disposal of waste products. Proper disposal of waste products. And then we also have the government playing a role that is educating people, that is sensitizing people on the dangers of swamp destruction. Educating people on the dangers of degrading a swamp can also help to overcome the problems that these swamps face. Then, of course, that will take us to understand what we call swamp reclamation as another point by carrying out swamp reclamation. Carrying out swamp reclamation. So we are going to understand what we mean by swamp reclamation as our subheading. Swamp reclamation. Swamp reclamation, we now look at a swamp has been destroyed. Now there is need for that swamp to be taken back to the original state in which it was. So here we shall say swamp reclamation is the restoration of a swamp, or we can simply say is the restoring of a swamp back to its original state. Restoring of a swamp back to its original state. Which means if a swamp has been existing in an area, people destroyed it for different activities, maybe for growing crops, for settlement, for industrialization, for road construction, whichever. You will find that there is need for this swamp to be taken back into its original status, of which the original status of a swamp should be the swamp being in an area naturally with vegetation on it. As we looked at the vegetation that we find on or in swamps, can be papyrus or can be trees forming what we call forest swamps that we attached mangrove swamps. The mangrove swamps are the ones that we find growing at the coast of East Africa, that is in the sea, in the salty sea water. That is where they are found. We have them for us in East Africa. We have those mangrove swamps at the coast of East Africa. When we go to P7, that is, we shall also be understanding other coastal, other mangrove swamps. That is in the Western Africa or in the West African coast. So the mangrove swamps are the ones that grow at the coast of Africa. That is, they like growing in that salty sea water, and that's why I said for us in East Africa we have them at the coast of East Africa. These swamps provide what we call those trees hardwood waterproof timber. The timber there is hardwood and it's waterproof. Therefore, we shall be able to understand that this timber that these swamps provide is very good for the building of the ships that can be used for fishing, and that's how those swamps support the fishing industry in the East African countries. That will take us to fishing. That is on page 88, whereby we have fishing defined as the catching of fish from the water bodies. Of course, the water bodies you have already mentioned them. Can be lakes, can be rivers, can be these swamps that we have just finished talking about. And we have the fish caught in Uganda. We have tilapia, which we are saying is mainly caught in Lake Victoria. And then we have others like the Nile perch. We have the small fish that we call mukene. And then we also have the landfish and the catfish. Remember, we say the mudfish is caught in swamps. Then we have the methods of catching fish. We have the methods grouped into two. We have the modern methods, and then we have the local methods that we can also call the traditional methods. The modern methods include gill netting, we have trawling method, and then we have the purse seining method and line method. Those are the modern methods of catching fish. Then we have the local methods that are like use of hooks, use of spears, we use these fishing baskets, and then some people just use hands. What they do, they surround an area and then they drain the area such that the water reduces. Then they will be using hands to catch the fish in that area. That is a local method of catching fish. This fishing, we should also be able to know that the people who do that fishing, people who catch the fish from the water body, are the ones that we call the fishermen. Then these fishermen can take the fish and they sell to the ones we call the fishmongers. So we need to tell the difference between fishermen or a fisherman, if it is one, a fisherman, and then we have a fishmonger. A fishmonger is the one who buys fish from the fisherman and goes to sell it in order to get a profit. Whereas a fisherman is that person who goes to the water body to catch this fish. When this fish is caught, we need to understand that there is what we call fish preservation. Fish preservation simply means ways of making this fish to stay safe for a long time without it going bad. And you will find that here we shall also be having two methods here, two types of methods. We have the local methods of preserving fish, and then we have the traditional, the modern and the traditional ones. The modern ones include tinning, canning, and then we have what we call refrigeration. That is keeping the fish in the fridge. Then when it comes to the local methods, we look at methods like salting, that is use of salt. We have smoking fish, we have sun drying fish, and we need to note that most of the fish we have in East Africa, more so for us in Uganda here, is preserved through the method that we call smoking. That is the commonest method of preserving fish that we have in Uganda and East Africa as a whole. We have the importance of fish. Of course, on page 88, the first one tells us that fish is a source of food. Fish can be eaten as food. That is what I believe everyone cannot fail that. Then we have talked about this fish being sold to other people. Of course, it means that fish can be sold and one gets the income, that is money. And then the bones of the fish can be used for making the animal feeds. And then, of course, some people get employed in that fishing. They make it their economic activity, their way of survival. So that can also be another advantage. And we go to the problems facing the fishing industry on page 89, as we shall be ending our discussion there. The problems facing the fishing industry, we look at problems like water hyacinth, that is what we call the water weed. You find this is the weed that grows on the water. It covers the water, and you will find that it becomes difficult for the fishermen to spread their nets to catch the fish. And even the movement of boats will become difficult in that area which is covered by those water hyacinths. So that one becomes a problem. Then the second problem is that some fishermen use poor fishing methods that can even get the small fish, the young fish rather, from these water bodies. And we find these ones who use the small sized nets. We have these nets with small holes. You will find those holes can pick all sizes of fish. And tomorrow the fishermen will now lack what to fish. And then we have the problem of inadequate market, that is lack of ready market for the fish that will have been caught in an area, and we find that market is down and someone will just encounter a loss there. And then finally we have poor facility storage, that is storage. The storage facility is poor. They will not be having enough or proper ways of storing, and this will make the fish to become to go bad. Then we shall be going to the solutions to the problems. What should be done? That is creating markets for the fish, and then of course we have like improving on the storage by introducing modern storage, and then enforcing laws to the other ones who carry out fishing, the other poor fishing methods. They should be arrested. That is enforcing laws against those poor fishing methods done by those other fishermen. Of course, this will help to overcome that problem. Then we had the problem of water hyacinth. These ones can be destroyed in either manually or through the use of chemicals. We have some chemicals that can be sprayed on those water weeds and they dry up. Or sometimes people can just destroy those water hyacinth using the manual energy, using their physical effort, like using hands or using some machines to pull that water hyacinth, and they take it away such that water is exposed or the lake is open for these fishermen to carry out what we call fishing. Now, we have ways of controlling the water hyacinth. As I've already said, we can have, chemicals, and then we can use beetles to feed on them. Those beetles, those pests can eat it. They can eat those hyacinths and they disappear. And then using machines and also using the hands, as I had already explained. Then we have the last heading giving us the importance of this water hyacinth. They can also be good, how they can be used for making animal feeds, these water hyacinths. And then they are used in making crops. And also, when they are removed like that, they can be fermented into manure. That is what they call compost manure. So it makes us to understand that these are also good. Dear semi-candidate, for now, we end our discussion there. And I thank you for being part of this lesson. May God continue blessing you.